It just depends. That's what the Merrill chain is to hide that squish on the top button.
Position heal thyself.
Okay, so
Lovely. We're all back. Pip, you all good there? Can you hear us? Great. So, re-adjourn the meeting.
Yep.
Back over to you, Katrina. We're up to additional options 3.
Can I just ask a question on depreciation?
Sure.
Before we go on to that, Katrina. So we've spent in excess of $10.4 million in the last this triennium of depreciation reserves on capital projects. Is that about right?
I would say that that's the budget that we've spent, not necessarily all come out of depreciation
Okay,
reserves.
so that's not operational yet. That's
No.
just so that's capital works on water. And if that sort of rate of spending is continuing, because it's slightly increased, are we going to have enough in reserves to cover that?
Based on the modelling that Wellington Water have done in terms of the use of the depreciation reserve, which is used for renewals for building work, then yes. Any more questions up to 2.2 before we move on?
Does it every time I sit down?
Okay.
Moving on.
Let's move on. Section 3. So, part of what we did, because we've had sort of discussions around looking at different options to just different things that we could perhaps come into play for next year's annual plan. So we've set out some options that officers have considered, and I'd just like to take you through those. So the first one is the sealing of our rural roads. So as you all know, we didn't put any funding in year 1 of the long-term plan to continue that sealing program of work because it's not funded by NZTA, it's fully funded internally by us. And we did say when we adopted the long-term plan that we would review that for year 2. So we've gone away and had a look at what we could possibly do to, what are the different options that we could do to bring that program back into play. Now, one of the real risks around putting this program of work back in place is deliverability of our capital program on our roads. So that's already quite constrained. So adding more work to the program of work would put that under further risk. And so that would be sort of a preface to what I'm sort of about to give you the options on. It would be dependent on whether we could actually physically do the work. So there's one thing to say we could put it in the program and we can build that into the annual plan, but it's another thing to actually deliver it. So we need to be realistic about whether we can even deliver it. So,
Katrina, can I ask you a question? So we still, with the safety issues, we still continue. We've got
Yes.
budget.
yes, and what Kotani helps us with the funding.
And that's co-funded. So,
Yes.
and do you have any idea how many kilometres of rural road that we repair under safety and speed?
I do not, I'm sorry, I don't know.
It's a case-by-case basis going through.
Yeah.
If it's identified and proven as a safety, that's when that can.
Yeah, so it's usually your abutments to bridges, which you have built so that it's your, maybe outside of a school, those types of things, a very dark, dingy corner kind of thing. So it's those types of things. So it's in the low cost, low risk program.
Harry, Tim's,
I'm trying to just get a feel for would there be 10 works that were completed in that area, or would it be?
Harry, Tim's online, he may know.
Tim? So the question is, under the low cost, low risk work,
something like that.
what are we doing?
No, reasons for my call. Well, curious, it's generally project specific, so it's just called last one.
I'm sorry, Tim, we can't understand you.
You sound like you're underwater.
It's raining here in Darwin. I'll move.
You're still there.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I don't think that's working.
Is that better?
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah, generally the low cost, low risk category is just project specific, so it's little pockets of work around the place. But we have identified going forward the safety and the rural roads with regard to widening the under width roads. And we've just started on Western Lake Road, so the first section this year we're doing from Abbott's Creek Bridge to the railway crossing. And that does take up quite a large chunk of our allocated budget. And the rest is just sign and improvement on curves on the main roads, along with guardrails where appropriate.
Thank you, Tim. Just so I have a feel for that, what would be the set budget each year from NZTA?
You've got roughly about $250,000.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Just to put all perspective.
I say 230, sounds pretty close. So unfortunately, previously we had put in 1 kilometre of unsealed road cost 200,000. That's actually increased and doubled. It's now $400,000 to deliver to seal 1 kilometre of road. I've checked that with Tim prior to writing this report. So we're actually looking at $400,000 is the cost.
But it's not just the fact of actually putting the road in, there's also the ongoing maintenance costs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, yeah.
There is also maintenance costs for unsealed roads, of course, as well. Yeah.
But the 400K just doesn't include maintenance. It is
No.
Oh, that is just.
Yeah.
So we've looked at different options, which I will discuss with you, 4 of them. So first of all, the first consideration is not to consider including this in the program of work for the 22-23 year. Main reason for that is the constraints in terms of the deliverability of the CAPEX program of work already. There is an alternative. We could reinstate it and fund it directly through rates, which is what we've done previously.
Yep.
So that would mean at a cost of $400,000 per kilometre, an increase of approximately 2.1% on rate.
What percentage is urban and what percentage of that is rural?
70% is rural, 30% urban. Another alternative, option 3, is to reinstate the program of work and fund it through the financial contributions from developers. Now, I've got a little note there and I've got a full discussion on that at 3.1.2 over the page. So if we can just park that one for a second and we can come and discuss that. And then of course what we could do is we could reinstate the program of work and we could fund it through increased borrowing. Now, $400,000 doesn't seem much, and the cost in year 1 is, you could say that's not too bad. But if you wanted to reinstate this and fund it every year through borrowing, then it's going to add up really fast.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's why
All the rates.
I haven't recommended that. So going back to option 3, is the use of the roading contributions. Now, at the moment, you will be aware when a development happens, we can, under the combined ownership plan, we have a variety of financial contributions that we collect, one of which being rural roading contributions. So there is a possibility that we could, and I've outlined the sections in the combined district plan that sort of cover off the use of those roading contributions. We could fund this $400,000 out of that. However, relatively risky because at the moment we've only got $400,000 into the long-term plan each year for those contributions, and that would basically clean it out and it wouldn't give us any capacity to use that for anything else. So I'm not necessarily recommending that as well. Alice.
So on this, I see no evidence of the benefit of doing this at all. With 270 kilometres of unsealed roads, we're all going to be dead and buried 3 times over before you see any actual improvement. So if anything, I would extend apart from you, because Alex, because you're very young, but, you know,
What do you say?
but the reality is 1 kilometre out of 270 is going to make no difference whatsoever to the safety of anyone on our roads. We're better off if we wanted to do something like this to extend the program that Tim's already working on, which is widening the existing roads and making them safer rather than just sealing a road for the sake of sealing a road.
Exactly, and that was the point when we discussed this last year at the wrong LTP, that rather than spend the money on sealing, put the money into the road safety, because there's parts of all this network that need, as Tim said.
Now, I know our resolution was when we adopted the LTP that we would relook at it after year one, but if we reinstated it, is that a change of significance that requires further consultation? Because we did consult in the LTP on this.
Good point.
But your consultation also said you would review it.
No, that was a last minute addition.
Is when you do your resolution.
Okay.
So it's like, so when
The
you,
question would probably come back to levels of service potentially, is it increasing the levels of service on the road significantly, 1 kilometre?
760k.
Through you, Your Worship. I'd like to ask a comment from Pamela, because councillor Colenso, because she was very passionate at making sure that this got back in. So I'm just wondering, knowing this information, if that's changed any, or do you have any suggestions on how it could move forward?
I think, like everybody has said, 1 kilometre and then the amount of unsealed roads we've got is a very insignificant amount. I also need to point out that Pip was equally as passionate about the rural roads, and so was Jeffy. So I think that their comments would be appreciated as well. I think the safety on the road, whether it's sealed or unsealed, is the paramount thing. And so if doing 1 kilometre of resealing a road is going to be insignificant, then we need to put the extra money into doing the safety aspects of that. And whether that safety aspect is that we seal a corner of a road, whether we widen a road, we would take Tim's advice on that. But I think something into rural roads needs to go back into it.
Yep, totally agree, but as we get down, you'll see something else on there too, so.
Okay, so shall we?
Want to say anything?
Yeah, I think this brings up what was
Can't
said.
hear you, Pip.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Oh, you can now.
You know, this just goes to show as well, last year when we were saying, please don't do it, and it'll never be as cheap today. And you know, it'll never be as cheap in the future as it is today. And now we're told that it's doubled in the amount. So how long do we put this off, and then how much does it cost? Because the reality is, what we were talking about was roads that are being used a lot more. We know that the traffic is extending. We know that people, you know, are travelling out to Ngawi. We know that people are travelling out to Tora. They're using those rural roads. We talked about putting something in place with regards to safety, and nothing's been started on that yet. And I understand that you say that you're waiting for Waka Kotahi, but we already know, you know, where there is. We know that, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, there was a serious accident on our rural roads where the chopper had to come in and people had to be flying over to Wellington. So what do we do to ensure the safety, not just of our residents, but also of the people who are coming in to enjoy being in the South Wairarapa? So our tourist side as well. Dark sky was another reason why we were looking at it. So my question to everybody else is actually, how long do we wait to actually reinstate it, something that had always been in place and that was done every year? And how much will that end up costing if we don't reinstate it?
Okay, Pip, so you've seen all the same data we're seeing and the financial pressures we have. Are you advocating that we have a 2.1% increase in rates to accommodate this?
No, I'm looking at the options the same as everybody else, and I think it would be something really good that to go out for public consultation, because we did have people come and speak to us last time with it, and to see how whether or not their concerns have been allayed by us stopping it, or where they're sitting now. I think it'll be very good to actually hear back from our ratepayers on how they're feeling about it after a year of not having anything done.
GP, what
GP.
do you think?
Well, let's face it, I'd like to see it back in, but no, because safety is paramount to me. And as Tim has just outlined, we're getting into some safety work on the roads now. And you can't tell me that 1K done on the shooting butts road is going to save a life out of Tora. I would sooner seen that money spent on tidying up the roads in the rural area. And I mean, look, Pip, let's face it, we'd all like to see it on. You know, 10 years ago, we used to do 3K a year, and then Waka Kotahi cut their funding right back, and that brought it right down.
Down to one.
You were on it, time, right back down to 1K. We could, you know, we can't keep safety and have nice Task Hill roads.
So GP,
Can I just thank you so much, GP, and I totally agree with you. But what I would like to say is, how about we see what that the works looks like that is actually being done right around our rural communities for the safety of those roads, so that way we know what it is going towards. Rather, we've heard about the Western Lake one now over the past year. Let's see what it has been put into instead. Because that's the first one that we kind of know about, and so it would just be good to let people know what we've done. Like I always say about the good news stories that we never actually get to see.
Well, certainly we can do that with, I won't ask Tim now, but certainly he can let us know what's happened in the road safety over the last 12 months and what's planned over the next 12 months to give some feedback to our ratepayers. Yeah.
Sorry, Alex, he does report on safety and things in every assets and services committee, so it's all there.
Yeah, but we'll get it.
But yeah, we could definitely incorporate that.
It's just highlight
Something
the
people
next assets and services.
Yeah. And it's highlighting the rural roading, which is what we're discussing right now. So, I think if rural roading's in there, then there's nothing wrong with having an overview.
Oh, Rebecca, you have a question?
No, I didn't actually. It was Lee.
Oh, Lee.
Just a quick thing to throw in the mix. So from what Tim said, there's 250,000 spent on safety aspect. That we've fixed on 400,000, but maybe what's the impact if we say we'll add another 100,000 into that 250,000 just for safety? So you see what I mean?
Is the 250,000 without the Wakakotahi subsidy, or?
No, that will
With subsidy.
Yeah, so if we said we'll top that up a bit to have more safety improvements, we don't need to land on 400,000.
What's the biggest difference you can make in road safety on rural roads is to lower the speed limit.
Yep.
So that does not cost you money, or there'll be a certain amount of consultation. That is the biggest bang for the buck you can make, full stop. And you will reduce, and if we model the safety benefits that will occur from that. And just bear in mind, when we're talking about rural roads, Tim is actually talking about sealed rural roads and unsealed rural roads.
We knew that.
So your biggest risk on the network is not your unsealed network, it is your collector roads.
Yep.
Okay, so if you want Tim to explain where the risk is, so the shoulder widening and the widening is on those collector roads that are actually sealed already. That's where your risk is.
Okay, Colin. Yeah.
Very good, thank you. Yeah, so I guess looking at the cost of resealing 1 kilometre of road nowadays doubling, effectively, I think when I first went on council, it was something like 100,000, and there was a bit of subsidy there from NZTA. You've got to think about where we go for the future, because if we make a commitment this time round not to do any new seals, there's no more money next year or the year after or the year after. There's pressures on us all the way through. So we're going to continue to delay this, or continue to not be in a position to be able to fund it. So what we're talking about here is something that's really long term. I mean, disregard this year and say we'll just carry on and maintain the safety aspect of it, which I really support, then there's not going to be any money in the pot next year for that reseal to be done, or the year after, or the year after. So I'm just throwing it out there. It's something probably that we need to have a long-term vision on about sealing in particular.
Yeah, and I think we did, I think after that, but I suppose we've got to say the question, how much is enough seal? Yeah,
Well, exactly.
That's the question.
It's actually cheaper to maintain a
It's
gravel
200
road than it is to maintain a seal.
kilometres of sealed road for 12,000 people. Adequate.
I love gravel road.
Sealing of roads is based on the current technology. Now, I do know that over in India, they're using plastics to actually seal road, which is actually a lot cheaper. However, I think this was identified at our last LTP that once the roading funding has gone, it's gone. We ain't never going to get it back. And we're still waiting to hear back from Waka Kotahi with regards to what they're going to be doing with their speed limits. So we can't actually act on ours until they do theirs.
Yeah. But that's in progress. though. Yeah.
I have no idea.
Could you listen to your no risk off funding as one of the possibilities? They're saying there's no funding, but it's not water.
So, but that's the next discussion.
That's what
You're
I'm saying.
right. If we said, look, this is just too difficult, there is a possibility to apply to government to say 1.2 million, we'll do 3Ks now.
Yeah.
And then the next LGP, we look at it again as a way we might look at that no worse off funding. But I think that's a separate discussion.
Yes, it'll stop us going around the circles here.
Can I
Identify what is.
just on that, I'd like to say that what I've listened to, everybody's saying emotive issues. I think this is great. I want to ride on a Passover. Nothing in this paper has identified any benefit or any analysis of what do we get for sealing a road. So you're making decisions here on emotion. You need to make, or not sealing road always, right? Yeah, but we can't afford to make $400,000 investments on, oh dear, I'd like to drive on a sealed road. So if we're going to look at this, we need to get real information and a proper benefit analysis of what we're going to get out of 1 kilometre of sealing.
And if we're not going to.
If we're not going to get benefit, we don't do it.
If we're not going to seal, then we also need to know the actual maintenance of the road, the grading of it. and
Cost
things
benefit analysis.
Yeah.
Well, the answer to what Pam has said and what Lee had said is in 3.1.2.
And I
It's the
think,
increasing of the rural roading subsidy. Just for this, you know, you don't have to spend it on a disaster or anything like that. But if you've got a bad corner safety aspect, you can use that.
So absolutely, if it was identified, if there was one sort of section of road or whatever identified, then we could have a discussion about how to fund that, and that could be use of that rural component of the.
can I say something? We had a person came and talked to us at one stage about, for example, the Glen Morgan Road, where more and more people are coming up that, but they have a corner on there where people get stuck and they have to pull them out and things like that. If we can identify that sort of issue on a scale on our rural roads, then maybe we can look at what we're doing.
But Tim is already doing that.
Yeah.
That's part of the safety improvements.
Yeah. Cool. All right, let's keep going on.
Yeah.
Okay, 3.2. Build the rural roading reserve. So that's at the moment we currently collect $300,000 from ratepayers to set aside into a reserve for emergency work, for unfunded works for our roading network, our rural roading network. We could look at increasing that if that was something that councillors wanted to look at. So at the moment it's sitting at around 1.2 million. So if there was an appetite to do that, we've put an option in here, option 2 under 3.2.1. So if we added an extra $200,000 to that reserve each year on top of the 300, which would bring it to 500,000, then we would increase rates by about 1%, and that would be split 0.7% to rural 0.32%.
Amanda, do we, because we never had this in our LTP discussion, if we put it in, do we have to consult? We don't?
It's not significant.
That's good.
Just on that, I'm cautious that if you add a lot of small things up together, we start to. So individually, that might not be significant, but if we start to add things up, we start to tip towards it.
Colin?
Well, it's not an immediate issue, it will be long term. With Wakakoti reducing the funding, the other 52% as part of the FAR for that special purpose road, that poses huge risk for us in the future with that road funded.
We factor that into the LTP though, because we know they
Yes,
have been given warning. But I think the better question is 1.2 million adequate?
No.
Given the rising costs of roads.
Road, yeah.
And what happened in the East Coast can happen here tonight.
That's right, yeah.
And you know, I mean, if I go council, there's only one thing I've done. I'm proud to have got this in a few years ago, and hell, it saved our butt many a times. I mean,
So at the moment it's at 1.2. Katrina, is that adequate? And when do we need to start increasing it to keep rate of inflation, pace of inflation and changing climate?
So it's right, it's very subjective because it is the unknown. We haven't utilised that reserve for some years. Probably at least while I've been on council for 3 years, we've been building it up, but we haven't actually been taking anything out of it. But as Councillor Jetson said, tomorrow we could need another $5 million. We don't know. So, you know, we all know that we are seeing more severe weather events. And so we do need to be starting to really give some thought to this.
Yeah, I mean.
Just on that note, Melanie and my team is doing the risk assessment for our climate change strategy at the moment, and that's due to come to you guys in the next few months. And so I think that will help us it'll present a clear case around what kind of investment we might need to look at.
That might be a factor for the next annual plan, once we've got a bit more information around it, much like the rural roads, the risks and safety.
Yeah, Harry, could you tell us when Wakakotahi comes in to assist when we have a major event?
So it has to be an actual emergency event, not one that might happen, and not one that's been a slow build like Hannaford Road. So that would be out of scope. But an emergency, bridge failure, a slip that happens, right? Not just a slow slump. Those are emergency events, and they will fund up to 80%. And so we would pay the underbalance.
So then, with this as a reserve for emergency events, 1.5 would be reasonably okay if we're getting 80% from Wakakotahi.
No, I mean,
that's $10 million there.
The only risk we've got, so I suspect we're going to get a lot more slumping than we are slips.
Sorry, I did actually, that was not 100% correct, GP. We are using that reserve for Nakura Road.
yeah, that's the type of thing that Harry was talking about. We've got slumps out the coast there, White Rock Way. If they went tomorrow, we wouldn't get the 80% because they aren't recognised slumps.
Yeah, cool. So I'm going to go to you in a second, but Tim, you put your hand up then.
Yes, just clarification, the emergency funding kicks in if an event or an event causes in excess of $100,000 worth of damage. And in a rain event like Dovey, that data has got to be supported by a certified rain gauge somewhere from NIWA. So that's your guidelines, and that covers the initial response and reinstatement back to prior condition. And just for example, Cyclone Dovey, initial response, and it was only a minor event. The cost to reinstate was just under 400,000.
Hey, thank you, Tim, and thank you for being available for these comments. You never know when we're going to need you. Pip.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad. I was going to ask Katrina about that because I thought that it was being used for Hanakura, and she's just confirmed that, which was what I had my hand up about the rural roading, but also, you know, out Chuchamuri and everywhere where they've got logging going on and things at the moment, so a lot heavier traffic going on these rural roads. Any kind of flooding event, you know, we've really got to bear that in mind, that a lot of that's going on around our district and our rural areas as well. And so exactly like Jeppy had pointed out, it would just take one weather event like what they've got on the East Coast.
Yeah. Cool. All right, then moving on.
So 3.3, this is another thing that officers looked at, was actually creating a new reserve for unplanned events. So not necessarily focused just on roads or just on water or anything, but it's about recognising the fact that we are in an environment where we are seeing more severe weather events. I'm not going to call it climate change, but we are seeing more events, and it could affect any of our assets, from our toilets and playgrounds to our roads and our infrastructure. And so council could look at considering setting up a new reserve that would be controlled by, the use would be controlled by council decision. So much in the same vein as the other options, every $200,000 from ratepayers would equate to about a 1% increase in rates. And because it was you, and we would, I would suggest that if this was something that council wanted to consider, that we would collect this under the general rate, which would mean that all ratepayers to some degree would contribute to it. Yeah, so I'm not necessarily recommending that because we're very conscious of what that we're wanting to keep a lid on our rate increases, but I wanted to explore that option and give an option.
Yeah, certainly this was raised in far as a result of the unexpected costs for Dobie, and we're seeing more and more of is, you know, we don't have a chance to adapt an annual plan from year to year, but we're not accounting for unexpected events which actually are almost expected now. We just don't know exactly what they are. So I think it's a prudent way going forward, but whether we can afford to do it in this annual plan, I don't know.
Yeah, any thoughts on that?
Thank God we don't know what.
Yeah, so at the moment we don't have a reserve, so we've got no impact. So we'd only be reporting a new reserve.
Guys, what do you think? Is this something we pop through to when we actually consult?
The LTP.
And the next annual plan?
I was thinking it might be the long-term plan. Yeah, a discussion for that.
And remember that they stuff around better off funding. This is exactly the time for climate change adaptability, and so the CapEx in projects to improve work, then you can do that. It doesn't have an OpEx effect that's going to change your rating. So, you know, so it's something that I think give it a bit of time to find out what that better off funding can get
for discussion. Yeah. Cool.
Okay, so that's the end of section 3, the different options. I'm not sure how you want to proceed. Mia, do you want me to go on to fees and charges? Or
I think we'll move through. I think we're discussing them as we go. So
yeah, okay. So fees and charges. We have had discussions about this previously. So you and I've attached an appendix 1 or 2, the full list of topics of fees and charges. I've highlighted here I guess the fees and charges that have changed reasonably significantly above the rate of inflation. So I've highlighted those all there for you, but I think it's probably easier if I open up to discussion on this because you have all seen, I hope, this.
We have seen this and gone previously. Yeah.
My biggest concern is kind of like the plan change deposit increase from $5,000 to $20,000 and who that's going to actually impact. Is it purely the developers or is it just the general Joe Blow?
No, it's developers, and it would be held as, it doesn't become part of council revenue, it actually sits on the balance sheet and it's refundable. So if it's not used, it's refunded to the customer.
They don't do damage to our.
If you remember, we had quite a bit of discussion on this in a workshop where it would recognise the actual costs of the, and it wasn't pitched at a level higher than they would be expected to have to pay anyway.
And do you remember they were using, some developers, almost using council officers' time to be free consultants? And weren't talking about now.
So if they're raising it to 20,000, is that going to then lead to the expectations that there will be a project in place?
Most of those developments be 1 million, 2 million, you know.
Can I just check with Russell, this is a deposit. So in other words, the cost would be greater than $50,000. So this is a bit of a risk assessment for council, because you can incur a lot of costs very quickly with a private plan change, because you do what commissioners, you do all that, you gear it up. If the applicant then decides to withdraw,
You chase it.
Yeah, so it's about getting
this
the
is
money
the
up.
scale of a private plan change this big. So this is, it's a bit like a bond. It's you're upfront asking the applicant to put money in, and then if they fold change, then we've got the money.
So how is that, my concern is how is that managed and
Oh, it's managed by the fund.
We do it at the moment, it's just the scales increasing.
And if they don't use
So it's done on a time cost basis, so my understanding is certainly the deposit is paid to council, and that is processed through finance, it goes into the balance sheet, but the operational side of it is managed through the planning team, and they keep records, and they also keep the developer or person who's paid the deposit fully informed of where they're tracking, and they say, well, okay, this piece of work that you want us to do is going to cost. Estimated to take
So
us
Russell,
Yeah, could I ask Russell just on that? Yeah.
Yeah, both the descriptors given by Harry and Katrina are correct.
Yeah.
Is a deposit, and in terms of the element of change that's arisen, we're trying to apply smarts where we should, in fact, fair and reasonable costs as RMA requires you to do. So linking the extent of the work involved to suitable level of deposits and visits for the work that may take several months, because it often involves zoning changes.
Is this a discussion that we likely to have in the combined district plan?
No, it's
Doesn't think it was.
as Katrina mentioned, it's an operational, it's us looking at our operational nature and applying fair and reasonable costs for the nature.
I think it's good risk management. I think it's
Absolutely.
When was that last review? I don't think we asked this in the workshop, but when was that last review? Does this been about 15 years ago that it said at 5? Or?
Yeah, it has been at 5 for quite some time, and certainly James, the planning manager.
Cool.
it's over there.
Here he is, he can talk about it.
They can talk to you about the benchmark.
Cool. So if you want some feedback on that, so I'll give you a little bit of context. So last week we had a single day hearing with one submitter, and the bill came in yesterday, day before, for not a full body of work from the decision maker alone, from the commissioner, and that was $6,000 alone. So that doesn't include, say, staff time. That doesn't include experts' time that we might require. There was about $4,000 or $5,000 worth of roading engineers' work on that project, and this is a fairly simple one. So all of a sudden, for what was a limited notified consent, you're looking at a starting point before you even put in council's time, you know, $10,000, and there's still a decision to come on it as well. So the money disappears very, very quickly. And what we'll be looking at with a lot of these plan changes potentially is quite complicated issues, particularly because we're in a bit of a flux at the moment where the world has moved on around us in terms of the district plan. We've put in a whole lot of really high level thinking that we're yet to fully implement. And we've also got a district plan review coming on, and also we've got willing developers to go early. So that creates a whole lot of really complex issues, particularly around transport and infrastructure servicing, right? So, you know, those things we need to be very careful of, and will require probably quite considerable work. And keeping in mind that the hearing that we just had was for a resource consent. So the major difference is essentially for a private plan change, there are 2 rounds of broadly public submissions, which is a whole bunch of extra work. So the whole public can submit on these. They're then summarised, which are weeks and weeks of work, plus further work after that to back up any points that they might raise. Then a second round of submissions, then a public hearing, and then a whole bunch of people might speak to their submission. So you sort of, it's very, very easily, start putting zeros on the end of this process. And that's the reality.
Thank you, James. Does that clarify that?
No, not really. So you're talking about complex issues and how you're wanting to make them effectively go away. It doesn't sound robust to me. People have their issues because they want to be able to express their concerns. So how does that fit in?
What we're doing is it's deposit to counter what the likely cost of council have to pay on their behalf and bill on their behalf. So
I personally don't think it's enough.
I think it's not about making this all making council less.
Oh, that's just what James has been saying.
No, they are complex issues, but they are cost and they just need working through.
Pam wants to ask James a question.
James, can I ask you a question? If 20,000 is a reasonable deposit for a straightforward plan change, then should we be looking at 2 levels on that, where it is a complex thing that you've got to go through the process twice with the consultations and things like that, asking for a bigger deposit? Because I think we need to cover ourselves as a risk to make sure that from council's point of view, we've covered our risk. And I see that there's 2 types of things in there, and they both have a different costing to them.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the answer to that is prudent financial management throughout the process. So making sure that we are regularly updating and billing. I think it would be I can't think off the top of my head a very simple way to distinguish between what is a simple and what is a more complex one. I think you are correct, the risk is in the higher ones, but again, as Katrina mentioned, we manage the process, we send bills out, and we have the opportunity to kind of ask some serious questions about the work that we're doing on behalf of the community if the applicant is not paying. We have some tools under the Act to withhold some sort of level of service. But look, there is a risk. I would suggest that the people who think that it's more of a risk to them will more likely push back on it in a legal sense. And then we get into fair and reasonable, and whether we are using a reasonable or fair and reasonable fee and charge under the Resource Management Act as a barrier to involvement with that process. I think the 20 grand is essentially a realistic amount that we're looking to recover. We'd need to have discussions with developers that are looking to do some things that look like it might be a more substantial cost. We're probably realistically looking at upwards of several $100,000, depending on the nature and complexity of the application involved. I don't think we could realistically put in a deposit for that amount and not just fail some of the requirements of the Resource Management Act from the beginning.
Yeah. Okay, I see that you've allayed some of my concern by saying that you're doing progress payments for those people, and therefore that end result isn't a huge figure. So, so that's fine. I'm happy with the 20,000.
Right, Councillor Fox.
Short question for James or you, Katrina. How does this compare with similar sized local authorities and populations?
It does vary a lot, and I know our local colleagues have the same deposit as we have, previously have, in terms of what the $5,000. But I did some more research again this morning, as I did when I put together the recommendation several months ago, and the 5,000s at the lower end. The upper end, sort of around $60,000-$70,000 that I've seen so far in some of the big metropolitan centres or some of the medium-sized ones. I wouldn't see it as a barrier for developers, because essentially I would expect that it wouldn't cover all the costs of council fees anyway. even though, you know, you could potentially argue that if we keep, well, there might be an argument that if we keep fees low, it'll encourage people. Well, I think actually when it washes up, when you're dealing with multi-million-dollar development works and applications, I think it's still reasonable. And again, we've got to be kind of realistic about just limiting our exposure to the best we can while being reasonable and covering as many bases as we can, sort of many spectrum of types of requests that we might get.
Oh, thank you. Good answer.
Yeah.
Great. We all moving on then from fees and charges. Any other questions?
I have one. I know we talked about it, and I see Carterton Council has raised a charge for responding to questions.
Yes,
we talked about it. Where did we get on that?
It was discussed.
We charge. We do charge.
We can charge.
We don't charge at present.
And we don't, I think, but since I've been here.
We have previously, but on a rare occasion.
Yes.
I think that's something for further discussion.
I think our policy is exactly the same. And I won't say this in public. Our policy is the same. It's just a matter of an hour of staff time is actually quite a lot.
Yeah.
And so.
So should we have a policy then over an hour? Staff time for an hour is part of.
So if you would expect, Carson's specific thing was they almost applied if you're a good customer, it may go over the hour, give and take. And so it was about the judgments about the nature of the inquiry. So if we read their policy, it's not going to matter
which is a terrible policy because it's
Subjective.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a separate discussion. I think we should talk about that.
So we can make a
because I know that there was a body of work out there, isn't there, to tell us costs of responding to have been, I'm assuming it's reasonably large.
Yeah, there's all good spots going on. So, yeah,
cool. Right, Councillor Maynard.
Hi, I've just got one thing with regards to fees and charges, and that comes to the housing for seniors. And I just wanted to clarify the new rent per week. The highest that it says in the actual fees and charges is 130, but in the actual report that was given, and now I've got to just flip back to that report. Sorry, bear with me. It actually says 150.
So I can explain that, Councillor Maynard. That is a new rental that we are proposing that we bring in for double occupancy. So for the units that have got 2 people in them, the proposal is to have a weekly rental of $150 because there is higher maintenance costs generally with having 2 people in the unit opposed to just 1. So that's why. So it hasn't been added to the fees and charges schedule yet because it's still proposed, but it would.
So where it says double, it's and it's been crossed out, and with the new amounts, that's not new. That's from last year.
Yeah, no, double is different. And Bryce, explain the difference.
Yeah, double is different. It's a word size.
Oh, sorry, I can't hear you. There's some banging or something. Sorry, Bryce.
Sorry, but
so double is different. Single occupancy double is different. Double is one bedroom that could take 2, but it's not really acceptable to take 2. Where we have got some units that can take as separate bedrooms and can take 2 people. So
there's only one person.
Double's only got 1 person.
So in the fees and charges, there's a double unit is considered a unit with a separate bedroom.
Correct.
But only 1 occupant. So what we're saying is if it's a double unit with 2 occupants, we're suggesting that we may look at increasing the rental on that to 150.
Generally, the 2 occupants are husband and wife or in a relationship, and so the income is quite substantially more than a single person.
Yeah, and there's more wear and tear, particularly like a larger unit.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, no, I think with that. Sorry, that was just obviously my mistake. Sorry about that.
We will make that perfectly clear in the schedule once we sort of approval.
That'd be cool. Just so then when people see it, they understand that when we're talking about the double, we're not talking about the double with the other room, that we're talking about.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, I was just asking a question, Trina, about process, whether, so the next section is about consultation engagement.
Yes.
So that, and that hinges on what the nature of any specific questions we may wish to consult with. So I just wondered whether we're best to go back and get your guidance on the
Recommendations 1 and 2 and 3.
Yeah, unless we want.
and then that will give us the guidance about whether that's a genuine question.
Do you want to move this forward? Yeah. So is everyone comfortable with now looking and discussing the recommendations 1, 2 and 3, and then we'll circle back onto the other parts of this report? Okay, so I'm going to propose that I ask for someone to move that we receive the 22-23 annual plan and engagement approach report, which I should have done earlier. Confirm that the work program for the 22-23 annual plan will align with year 2 of the 21-20, it's a 31 long-term plan, noting the following.
Apologies, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Mayor Alex, but I just wanted to say the very first one received the 22-23 annual plan, and remember there was consultation.
Yeah. I did have that written down too. And then also notes the projected average growth adjusted rates increase of 7.6% is within the increased limit set in the 21-31 financial strategy. Do we have someone happy to move that? Colin. Second, Councillor Hay. Right. All those in favour, please raise your hand.
Sorry, can we just add increase of average?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, average growth. Okay.
It does say. All those against, raise your hand. All those abstaining, please raise your hand. The motion is carried.
All right, what's
Average growth.
So just for clarity, and accepting those 3 recommendations, you're accepting for each of those options that were put up all the way through the report, the recommended.
The recommended option, absolutely right. Yeah.
I hate to be a bummer in this, but I mean, that 7.6 was based off a 17.7 rate rise of our original LGP. Not a 24%.
That's your opinion.
Sorry, explain what you mean.
The original LGP rate was peaked at 17.6%. That's what we were told we were going to go out there to our ratepayers with.
For this year?
No,
for the LTP.
For the LTP. So any other figures that go off that should be based off of 17.7 or 17.6.
They are. That's what the 8%.
Growth is on top of that.
Right.
But then it was 28.
Wait, can we just get Brenda across the line here, because we need to listen to where your concerns are.
The rate increase from last year's days, that's a starting point for this. This is the increase
on that.
On spending from last month.
So Brenda's actually asking, is the starting point the 17 point, whatever we had last
I think the percentage is irrelevant, it's the dollar value that we're starting at. So the dollar value that we collected from ratepayers last year compared to the dollar value that we're proposing to collect this year is where you get that.
Right. So it always gets back to what Alistair originally said, that, you know, when we work off percentages, it can be quite confusing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So do you understand that last year we collected X dollars?
Yeah, 21 million.
21 million. This year we're going to collect 21 million plus 7.6%.
An average of 7.
No,
not average, plus 7.
Sorry, let me just get this entirely correct. 7.8. So the last year 21 million. This year 7.8% increase in the amount that we're going to collect, that we're proposing. If we growth adjust that, so factor in increased rating units, and that's where it drops down to 7.6% of an average across every ratepayer.
It's
Does that make sense?
differently, so
Yeah, it makes sense, but yeah.
You're still not there though, are you, Brenda?
No, I'm there, I'm just not,
But we've gone through all the
not overly
financial.
happily, only
And
not.
what
not
we
looking
need,
at it.
there's no nice to haves here, there's what do we need to function as a council?
Exactly.
And we've gone through it line by line.
I understand that, Alex, but Brenda's not quite there yet. I would rather we get Brenda in a place where she is comfortable.
Yeah.
Rather than just, no, I'm not.
So it's not,
It's a bit of
it's not just the rates that really irk me, it's also the cost of petrol, cost of insurance. The fact that people have had to drop their insurance.
But none of that, we can't control any of
No,
that.
we can't, but have we done enough to get it down there, because we're asking for more?
Okay, so if I could just take it back a little bit, you know, when you look at the actual rates increase people are going to have, we're talking 9.7 or 1.1, you know, worst cases here. Okay, of that, 8.25% of that is just water. So if you took water out of the equation, the rates increase is 3.6.
Oh, I tell you, I would love to take.
Okay, so so just so you clarify, just so you're very clear, the rates increase in urban is 8.25% of the rate of the 11% is purely water. Right, so that's, you know, and nobody likes that. If we took water out of it, everyone would go 3.6%. Yeah, that's a great rates rise. We're on board.
But you'll be paying for it somewhere else.
But we will be paying for it. So, you know, we've, as you know, we've been through every available option with water. A lot of it we've got no say on. Most of it we've got no say. So I just want to make sure that you're comfortable, that you understand where we are, so that you can actually say, okay, I understand. Nobody here likes the fact that we're going to be telling people their rates may increase by 11%. There's not a single person around this table comfortable. But actually, we have no alternative. There's no options. That's the thing. If you can come up with an option, tell us.
And there's one other small thing to add in, that Katrina hasn't factored into this, the savings that we may find by year end. So that could be reduced a bit more.
Really, and also whether or not we have the stimulus, no worse off funding, whether we can play with that to reduce it even further. Yeah, and I really hope we can.
The new total rates take us 22.6 million. As opposed to 21. And I don't know where else you're going to get it from.
So potentially the savings, if we manage to achieve that, will reduce it by 0.75 dollars. Or more. Could be a little bit more. I'm not confident, but
Certainty in the West Side Fund, etc. So,
I mean, I'm with you, Brenda. It just kills me. I've been lying awake to bed worrying at night. I want to come out to a rate table and say 3%, you know, or it's keeping it, you know, near enough to inflation, it's called 5%. But there's just no fat in there, none whatsoever. And as Alice said, 8.75% is just water off that.
Right.
This is the real cost of running the system. And then we have to factor in inflation, COVID impacts, Ukraine war, the impact on oil.
And good on you, you factor that into the LTP of an inflation rate. That means we are not having to react to a blowout inflation.
No, I understand where Brenda's coming from, and but one, I just want to clarify. So Lee said that actually all the savings that we have worked out, they haven't yet gone on yet. So this is prior to any of those savings. So that's one thing I just want to clarify. So there is savings that are there. So just I'm really sorry. I know I'm going over some stuff you've just heard, but I just need to make sure I've heard it properly. Yeah, some people cut in and out. And the other thing is as well, I just want to confirm as well is that this is just the start, Brenda. Once we go out and talk to people, this is why it's the difference between engagement and consulting, and so that's why I think we need to get to number 4, because once we hear what people have to say, then that also helps us to decide on what we do at the end of the day. So
So I can say you still, your understanding is right, but if we do, the figures that I've got in here don't include any savings that we found for this year. It's not going to be massively significant, to be honest. You know, we'll be looking at 1% maximum, I'm thinking, at this point in time, but every little bit is going to help.
And depending where it comes from, you know, like we said, it may be that it makes a difference on the urban, but it may make a difference on the urban side. It might make a difference commercially. It might make, so it will have an impact on different people's rates.
Yeah.
And equally, without belaboring the conversation, your bigger opportunity is the petrol. That's a whole journey yet to go.
Yeah.
Can I just ask one final clarification on the savings? So if you look at 0.75%, 1%, so proportionately would that drop into the Featherston Greater Martinborough rates proportionally? So for example, going from 11.1
It depends on the savings and where we make them.
So none of the savings will be in the water space. You're all fully aware of that. So it would
evenly across.
It would probably be quite even, is what I would suggest here across all rate pairs.
That's cool. Well, so can I as well just thank James and Russell for being available? It's we need you here just in case we have some curly questions. So thank you.
District plan matter.
Yeah.
So Brenda, is that?
Yeah, doesn't mean that I'm happy with it, but yeah.
I don't think any of us are. None of us are. None of us are. So does that mean you'll vote yes to note it? Or?
Yes to note it.
Yeah. So Alex, do you want to redo the vote then? Because I think it's really important that as a council we all understand this together.
Okay, so I'll read them out.
Absolutely, Alistair.
So I have someone to move that we receive the 2022-23 annual plan consultation and engagement approach report. That we confirm that the work program for the 22-23 annual plan will align with year 2 of the 2021-2031 long-term plan. And note the following key variants that we note that the projected average growth adjusted rates increase of 7.6% is within the increase limit set in the 2021-2031 financial strategy. Moved, thank you, Lee. Seconded, Colin. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against, the motion is carried. So we'll now move on to point 5. I think.
I'm going to hand over to
4.
Point 4, but section 5 of your report.
Oh, yes, sir.
When do we need to do an extension time?
It's up to 4:30. Okay.
4:30 is it?
So, yeah.
We do have
But I am mindful that some councillors have to leave early. So if you do, but feel free to.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're on section 5 of the report.
Yep. Page 66.
I think it's reasonasonably clear that we don't, under those recommendations that you've just, that resolution you've just passed, need to consult under the Local Government Act. There's no requirement. And when I use the word consult, I mean the special consultative process or procedure, otherwise known as the SCP in the Local Government Act. That piece of legislation was changed back in 2014 to allow for more creative, innovative processes around engagement on annual plan. So the idea is you've written a long-term plan, goes for 10 years, the first 3 years, year 1 is you don't write an annual plan, so you've got that, year 2 and 3 you need an annual plan, and then the 4th year is your long-term plan reviewed again. So if you've done a really good process in writing your long-term plan, your work program should be pretty clear and you shouldn't deviate too far away from that, which that kind of allows the local government organisations to say, yep, we're pretty much on track, we want to keep doing what we're doing, we don't need to go out and consult because we're not asking significant, we don't have significant decisions to make, we're on track. So that special consultative procedure, which we call consultation, requires a question or series of questions to be put to the public. They get a submission, a formal submission process. They also get an opportunity to be heard at a public hearing, and then council comes back and considers any of that feedback as part of the decision making for whether or not, whatever the decision was, whatever the options were. If you use an engagement process, you can still have a submission process, you can still have public meetings, but you don't have a clear question around we're choosing between A, B and C. We're on track. These are the things that we put in our annual plan. These are the things that we're still going to do. Katrina explained some of the delays that we've had in some of the deliverables, which are largely outside our control and related to COVID-19. But you have a much better opportunity to have a broader conversation with your community about things in a bit more detail, potentially, without that black and white, these are the choices that we've got to make. I had a look around local government in New Zealand as part of this process to see who is consulting. Masterton and Carterton are both using the engagement process over the special consultation process. HUT are doing a consultation because they are building a major event centre and they've had major delays and cost blowouts in the tens of millions of dollars as a result of COVID. So they've made a call that that's significant. The significance policy, it's really interesting because it's that idea of when you get a lot of small things, when does that tip? So that's probably the place that we are in. How many small things have we got that would tip? So that's the conversation that you guys really need to have.
So can I just add to that? One of the things, when you do formal consultation, it governs the way that you must act as governance.
Yep.
So you must not show any predetermination.
Yep.
You must listen effectively and inquire only in matters of substance. When you have an engagement, you can ask questions, you can probe, you can have a discussion. So you actually have a richer conversation with the people than you would for a formal consultation process. So just something to be clear in mind, actually enables a whole richer.
Excuse me. Sorry, the council, your camera's gone off.
Oh, is that?
Yeah. Okay, we'll just fix that bit. So the Office of the Auditor General did a report last year, and which Amanda is referring to, and they looked at the innovative ways that the councils engaged with their communities to gather the information. You know, and they're quite deliberate. They weren't talking about consultation. And so, but the key point is it does not change the nature that you want to hear from people. You want people to write, send carrier pigeons, have public meetings, send more, get those ideas so that you have a richer conversation in town consideration. And those views take it with report, keep in mind. So that's the subtle difference between the two. That's why we're saying here, engage. The example that Colin will be very aware of as a real example here, because I made that call, was around fluoridation here in Martinborough. So in the fluoridation debate, it was debate. I said to council very clearly at the time, you do not have any choice but to introduce a 2-barrier system to meet the drinking water standards. You do not want to give the community the impression there is a choice. Yep. There is not a choice. It is not a consultation. You must have it. And we did that. So there's an example that we have done for just that very reason. Okay, so that's why, obviously, if you want to make the decision to consult, then we will do that. But our recommendation is to engage.
Very important question on that. What's the difference in cost between consulting and engaging?
At the margins.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think
Is that relevant? I mean, I think it's where your mindset is. I think more of a time thing. Is it a time factor?
I know it's a mindset, but the thing is that we've got a 0.2% increase in rates.
No, we're not talking about that. It's probably marginal.
Yeah.
There are very similar processes that you use. You use a very similar methodology. It's just the formality as Harry noted, under which that questioning, that deep engagement, those conversations, is a much more formal process.
Yeah, and look, I agree with what you said, there's nothing majorly different to what we flagged in the LTP. And the LTP allows you to actually, tuck the corners in a bit on one project or another. And I think we are, and we've spent a lot of time, what do we have, 5, 6 workshops on this? We've thrashed everything out. We've got as much saving as we can, but we're doing what we have to do. Right, and the significant increase is water, and we have to do that.
Cool. I don't know whether we've got our 3 waters person online waiting. But I'm just, how much time?
It depends whether, you've all read the report.
Yes.
If you're all happy to go with the officer's recommendation, which is to engage.
Yep.
Certainly that would kick off a process with Shield in comms. She's outlined very briefly some of it in here, but that would mean that would give us the ability to be able to get some really good collateral together and what that looks like, and come back to you with.
Let's got a question from Pitt.
Completely understand that. I think you'll know exactly what I'm about to say. I don't believe that we should be just going out and engaging. I think it needs to be public consultation. Thank you very much, Amanda, for letting us know what other councils are doing. However, none of them were on the front page of the paper as much as we were after our long-term plan and everything that happened. After our public meetings in November, now I attended them, and we said that we would be going out and consulting with regards to the annual plan at each of those meetings. So that's what our public expects. Now, I don't think that there's any way that we can turn around now and say that we're just going to, well, not just, but that we will engage with them. I think that, Jeppy, you brought up the fact that we've thrashed it out and that we'd had workshops. However, the public is not a part of those workshops. So we are needing to actually make sure that we go through the consultation process, because the reality is what they were given last year and what they agreed to with regards to the annual LTP wasn't in fact what happened.
Right. Thank you, Pip.
The only question I've got is if we said we'll engage, what does that do with the options that you presented, all these extra add-ons? Because if we say if we engage, the options are out. Yeah.
We won't be asking
Is that what you're saying? If we engage, the options are out. If we want the options to be considered, then we're consulting.
We could still put some of those options out to the public and sort of say, and engage on them. There's a very fine line. I guess the difference is, are you wanting the public to make the decision? Let's consult, or are you wanting to get feedback from the community that will then inform your decision making?
Sorry, Katrina.
Is that right?
So putting it out does not mean that the public votes for it. It's not popularity. No. You've got to make a decision. It's in the public arena. You put this is in the public report here. So there's nothing stopping you in your engagement, if you choose, to simply say, this is where we land, and these are the factors that we talk about. Yeah, and we can do that.
Yeah.
We can do that.
And if you've got significant feedback from people that said, actually, we really want Rural Road sealed, you could make a decision. Okay, the public seem really passionate about this, and we will spend extra money and we will increase the rates.
But if
we've got a few months between now and that decision.
If we consult, could we then not put new options on the table as a result of that consultation?
But we've just gone through all those
I know,
options.
it's coming back to what Phil said. Somebody comes along and says, what about, cutting the water off?
As Harry said, that we don't set, we shouldn't be changing significantly our annual plan in the first year. B, we've done a consultation in the long-term plan. C, we're not setting the rates, not striking, until 30th of June. So there's still time to absorb public comment and make changes. And we will have leeway when we look at the savings and whether or not the no worse off funding happens, and if it's not significant, we can still be taking on those opinions. So we're not presenting.
Not close the door.
No.
Well, we've got Skype to take into account new information. That's the thing, but we're not going out for full consultation.
Yeah.
And, you know, from my perspective, nor should we. We had a fantastic consultation, an incredibly high amount of engagement from our community, great feedback from them. We clearly fell over badly when it came to miscommunication around the rates. But I also feel that we cannot just use that alone as a reason to change a methodology in a second year.
Yeah, it also
Because
doesn't
we have the information.
Yeah, it doesn't change the reality of the financial information that's put in front of us.
That's right.
So Amanda, you were going to say something.
I just would like to hear from Pip through you, Your Worship, what questions you would like to see us consult on.
Well, I think we've already got the package there, Amanda. Like to be perfectly honest, with the majority of the information there. So it's just it's putting it out and as a consultation out rather than, you know, I keep hearing that there's not a big difference between engagement and consulting. So I don't see why it's such a big issue. But the reality is that there is a difference between engagement. Engagement is seen as informing.
Yeah.
And consulting is looking at consulting with your public.
It's not that simple. It's simply not that simple.
So the question still
remains. No, but that's why I wanted to put it in layman's term. I know it's not that simple.
The question is still relevant, Amanda, to you, Pip, is consultation is asking questions. What are the questions you would ask?
We've just gone through the whole annual plan. I'm not quite sure what you're asking me, Alex. So the things that we're asking on there, that we're being asked of, and where we're looking at going, is what we should be putting out to everybody, right?
Yeah.
We need all those options.
Yep, thank you.
None of them are
I just say something. So Pip, also speaking to you and Amanda, if we engage with our community, not consult, we do have potential to put some context around it. So, for example, no resource funding, we can say, look, this is what we've landed on, but here are the things we've looked at, and we believe it's in the best interest of the ratepayers to do this option. So you can put context around it all, which kind of reduces some of those other options.
But what you can't, the one thing you can't say, here is the annual plan, we would like you to consult and say, what do you think of this? You can't do that. Okay, so because you're not asking a question, you're asking someone about. And there's a very good reason for that, because someone may say, I want you to change this, like under change the water. And so that's a very significant thing, they're asking council to try and change. But other members of the community don't have the opportunity to comment. So that's why there's the, you know, what I'm hearing from people is that they'd like us to consult about, what do you think of our annual plan? What do you think of our story? What do you think of the wide context here? That's not a consultation.
No.
And that's what I'm just trying to, so I understand entirely what you're saying, but that's not a consultation. And so that's the thing that's going to get ahead around, you know.
Can we just hear from Jill? Jill, have you got?
So just to clarify, Harry, you're saying that everything that we've been given, there's no kind of consultation in it?
No.
In the legal sense.
Is that what you're saying, that what we've been given, there's no consultation in it? There's nothing that we can be asking our ratepayers? I want to get that clear.
We're still asking people for their opinions, and we have the ability to change.
I think if we ask Shell, when we did consultation, when we did the formal consultation for the LTP, we had a document that we put together and gave to the ratepayers or the residents who ever wanted to look at it. I understand if we're going out to do the engagement, we will still have a document that they can read to say what is there, and they can make comments on what is in that document. That's right. Is that right? That's right.
So for the purposes of this year's annual plan, we've taken engagement to include both informing and involving our community. And we are doing that because We understand that people wish to be able to not just understand what the current proposed annual plan is all about, but also make sure that their concerns are heard and that we understand what their aspirations and expectations look like. So as a result, the plan that we are proposing includes that pullout, and as I stated, looking at an 8-page pullout in both the newspapers as well as hard copies available at libraries, etc., which will provide that context that we were talking about earlier as to what is happening, how it's happening, why it's happening, and what you can do about making sure that you're heard. So there is a feedback element to it. We're then going to take that feedback and develop frequently asked questions out of it, and as well as look to do a video that hopefully Mayor Alex, we haven't actually asked him yet, will be able to treat as an interview with the community, where he's able to respond to those questions, which we can put online, and that is a second level of information sharing. We also have included an opportunity for the community boards and Māori Standing Committee to revisit their contribution at the last, or their submissions at the last LTP, and compare that to what is in the proposed annual plan, and ensure that they also are heard and that they are able to assess whether this continues to meet their expectations. And we will also continue with a public Zoom session, which just builds on the information we've already shared and hopefully covers any other questions that might still be outstanding. And all going well, we've also, please consider these as proposals rather than a given, also including public sit-down sessions at strategic points, where all of you have the opportunity to select which particular vantage point you might want to be at a particular point in time, where the public can have a sit-down with you and talk face-to-face, which again gives them the opportunity to be heard. So there's quite a bit, and then all of that feedback will be considered by officials, and we will then make sure that if there is anything that is significant material, that it is taken into consideration in the proposed annual plan.
I mean, that's factored in under number 6 there. There was the question earlier on, sorry, Russell.
Yeah, I just want to hark back and give some acknowledgement to what Amanda's raised in terms of, she gave you the historical context, drawing it back to 2014. Local government's an evolving scene. The challenge is for councils to have that connection with their community. And so the learnings from that, and some of the impetus for the change from 2014 is councils to find innovative and flexible ways to have that discussion with the community. So that's a key point that should be lost. And the other point is engagement is an all-encompassing phrase, which leads to a bit of misleading misunderstanding, but engagement is quite wide and allows for a lot of potential, whereas consultation is quite a narrow framework.
There was a question raised about whether we can piggyback off this engagement for questions regarding Three Waters. Is that possible? Our stance. No,
I'd like to keep that completely separate.
I'd like to see that completely separate.
Yep.
Okay,
right.
We've still got a lot of discussion around the comedy.
Oh yeah, and then it's evolving.
So is that discussion sort of the amount of feedback and the amount of engagement, does that make you a bit more comfortable?
Sorry, Alistair, are you talking to me?
Yeah, I was just wondering, after you got what Shields did and the process that's going to go through, does that make you feel more comfortable about the process?
So what are we looking? When are we looking at doing all of the public meetings? And each of the 3 counts?
It's all in the report. That we'll get clarification of the exact dates.
Oh, hang on, let me just quickly go back. Sorry, what page is that? I'll just quickly shoot back down to the end. Sorry, we were back up the top again. Sorry.
It's item 5, page 66 at the beginning, and then goes through to 69, where the late April, early May, mid-May, May. So there is, this has been highlighted in the report from officers.
Sorry, what page was it that you? that you're saying with regards to that? That's the,
0.6, page 69 is the plan.
it's not on here. Hang on.
Yeah. You need to go? Yeah, you did let us know that you were going to a doctor's appointment, so apologies from Jeppy.
You will hear me scream when he puts that big needle.
Can I come and do it for you?
Well, there we go. Thank you, Dave.
See
Say all.
Hi, GB.
So it is there in the report, agenda item C3, 0.6 on the timeline for public consultation, but the exact dates will be firmed up as we get closer. Is that correct? Thank you. So with that, do we want to put motions 4 and 5, or do we think we've discussed this enough and that we have the ability to make up a decision?
I would like to talk to the motions. Actually, I think we probably have had a good discussion and it would be good to move that forward.
So we'd like to discuss item 4. Yeah. Recommendation 4 that we're noting. Then notice we're only noting. We're not resolving.
No. Is there the opportunity to resolve today that we will?
We're giving direction to staff on the direction. We want to.
I'd like it noted that I'm saying we should be consulting and not just engaging.
And that will be reflected in your vote, Councillor Maynard.
Well, this is under noting, so it's not.
Pass and move forward again.
Well, it does say in the council will not consult, but will undertake best practice engagements. We need to go outside and get significant, since people are waning in the room.
That we will do that after. So anyway, do we have a mover for points 4 and 5 as read?
Yes, I'll see.
And you'll second that. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against, please raise your hand. Councillor Maynard. Any abstentions? No. The motions, the notes and motions are passed. And with that, we'll have a 15-minute break.
Thank you all.
My battery's gone flat.
Oh, sorry, no, we have Dougal list. Actually, we're not going to take a break. Sorry, we were. Dougal, are you okay if we have another 5 minutes just to take a stretch of legs?
Of course. I don't want to stand between you and your cup of tea.
Thank you very much, Dougal.
See you shortly.
Hi, Bex.